Hi everyone, welcome to Kodo People Talks. For this time, I have the pleasure to share the screen with Cole Naper. For me, is one of the headlights of people analytics globally. Together, David Green, and I'm learning a lot. I have to say that because they are doing the hard work of teaching us how to implement and use people analytics. Cole has been creating Center of Excellence for 10 years, more than 10 years, from scratch to a scale for big corps like Texas Instrument, Toyota, PepsiCo, and not too big corps too. But also recently you got the position of VP of people analytics in or Autonostic. So Cole, I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing good, and thanks for having me, Francisco. And I've really enjoyed our chats that we've had offline as well. I'm excited about the things I see that Kodo People is doing.
Thank you, thank you. You are so kind. We are trying to raise awareness about the need of assessing people and uses in that kind of data for people analytics. Starting from a scratch, Cole, because maybe our audience are not familiar with people analytics. Maybe they've listened the term, but they don't know exactly what it is. What is in plain English, please, people analytics?
Sure. I kind of tend to take a very literal definition. And so analytics itself is a pretty broad field, but usually it's about bringing data and analysis to solving business problems. And my angle on this is it's only business problems related to the people, primarily employees. Sometimes it gets beyond employees to things like the labor market and things like that, but primarily it's based on employees and how they're working. And I have to do a little plug here. My podcast is called Directionally Correct. And I
That's
find
right.
that people analytics as a field is just trying to show the relationship in a directional manner with business results at an organization.
Thank you, Cole, for such great definition. I encourage everybody to listen to Cole's podcast. You do that with Scott, right? So, if
Mhm.
you want to learn more about, people analytics, please listen to Cole's uh, podcast. It's such a great definition. It's about people. It's about employees. How to understand what's going on in organizations. I think to be better, to succeed, to improve things, to enhance. What is the main goal when it comes to apply people analytics goal from your experience? Maybe you can share with us some insights.
Yeah, when I think about using people analytics, I think about first of all starting with the business. So what are some of the key issues that a business is facing? What are their key KPIs or OKRs or whatever they're using as an organization? And then trying to go back and understand all the processes and how they lend themselves to making employees the most effective for achieving the business objectives, right? And so some of the common use cases in this space are around things like, well, employee turnover. If you don't have employees, if they've left the organization, that's probably going to create some issues for the organization. Or hiring. If we don't have the right talented employees that work at an organization, we're probably going to run into a lot of problems. And then I think about things in the middle, like what happens while an employee is working there. And I think this is why organizations focus so much on things like engagement and wellness, because engagement shows a
Yeah.
really strong relationship to employee productivity. And then the other side of that coin is if employees aren't feeling like their best selves, they're probably not being very productive either. And so wellness is also a goal for people analytics.
Yeah, that's great. I think even in trying times, last week, I'm not sure now. Silicon Valley Bank, collapsed, and then the storm started to grow, and then as a consumer, we need to take care of our employees. I think nobody can doubt that. I think that is the goal for this 2023, and also keep the people engaged. And if I'm not wrong, we can use people analytics to get some information to be able to do that better. Am I wrong or am I right? What do
No,
you think, Cole?
you're definitely right, and I think what you're really talking about is what sometimes called employee listening or employee sensing. So how do
Yeah,
you know what's actually going on at work for employees? But even to use your example of the Silicon Valley Bank, that's outside of work, right? Are people
yeah,
feeling stressed because the provider of their funds isn't allowing them to withdraw? That's an incredibly stressful situation. And so
yeah.
how can organizations, first of all, be aware of what's going on? Second of all, listen. And then third, and most importantly, how can they take action to support employees to help them be their best selves?
Yeah, definitely. I remember a case that a project that we did with Nokia Communications in Poland some years ago, and we were using behaviors as a independent variable.
Mhm.
Talking more scientifically,
Well, I know
and to
Kodo people
predict.
cares about behaviors, and I'm a big supporter of that.
Thank you. And then we were trying to predict group performance because they were working using agile methodologies, and then
Mhm.
they didn't have a problem, a real issue with individual performance or productivity, but they wanted to, how can we increase our squad teams uh,
Yeah,
teams performance as a group? So it's
yeah,
a very complex question with a complex answer. But we did our best. We were using, because there is some controversy with the models, no, people analytics models, maturity models, right? I
yeah.
was checking, version traditional model, well, where predictive analytics is on the top. And then David Green is talking about 9 dimensions, and in not a particular order that you can decide when to get into it. So, wondering, because predictive analytics is cool,
Yeah.
but we should go farther. We should go into prescriptive analytic. We
Mhm.
should close the gap, or maybe we shouldn't. I'm
Yeah.
so curious about your opinion about this.
Well, let me kind of go three different directions here because you covered a lot of
Yeah,
territory in that question. The first part was
yeah,
around group performance, right?
yeah,
And how sometimes individual performance and group performance might be at odds at one another. One of the very hot topics over the last 2 or 3 years has been the versus hybrid versus in-person
yeah,
debate. And people analytics has been at the thick of this debate trying to understand what brings people out to the best. And one of the things that you see is if you just study productivity at the individual level, remote is the best environment, right? But what seems to suffer is group performance. So everybody individually is doing their job. It's just the connections between individuals and the interdependencies amongst a team that seem to suffer or attenuate over time. And so that's a really interesting finding when you're trying to think about things like group performance. The second part you brought up was about maturity models and how sometimes they lead you astray. One thing that I've written about before, and I really believe this strongly, and I haven't heard anybody else say this, which is I don't follow any maturity models. And that's not a controversial thing to say. But what I do follow is I say, be world class where your organization needs to be world class. So if they have a very particular spike in some certain kind of problem, become world class at answering that problem and neglect almost everything else. And I promise you that will work out well for you. A lot of teams think that they need to build their data foundation and then try to go do some kind of executive tour to understand all the different problems the organization is facing and then have some kind of intake process to prioritize answering those questions. And all of that time adds up to just being waste where they're delivering no
yeah,
value to the organization. And so the only
yeah,
way you can deliver value and value quickly is by tackling the key problems as quickly as you possibly can. And then to your last point about the bridge between predictive and prescriptive and whether or not we should even go there. One of the things that I'm excited about is my company Orgnostic just actually released a generative AI tool. And we've been leaning heavily into the prescriptive space in our tool for a while now. Now, you could say, oh, that's scary. That's not something you should do. And I would say, not so much. And the reason why is this: it's because we have built a corpus of knowledge of taking all of the research from the academic literature, as well as things like Harvard Business Review, HR blogs, and all of the best practices associated with what should you do if you find X is a problem, right? And so
Mm,
our
mm,
tool is really, really great at identifying that X is a problem. And now what we've done is we've gone one step beyond that to say, and here's a summarization using generative AI of what the best in class research tells you to do to fix X as a problem. And I feel like that is a very surefire way of delivering really salient value for an organization, and frankly, taking some of the cognitive load off of people like HR business partners and managers and executives who have to go and fix these problems, because now they don't have to go do their whole literature review and get a master's or a PhD on their own just to figure out how to answer a problem scientifically.
yeah, or paying a consulting firm, no, to
Yeah.
solve the problem. Uh,
Yes,
yeah, that
exactly.
is the magic. I think that is the cool thing about tools like yours, right? And putting in your hands something that you can immediately apply, and that kind of generative AI, this case for good, for better. I think everybody should at least try it out once,
Yeah.
right? To figure out how it works, right? Because I'm envisioning all the benefits of using, recently Google released generative AI across workspace, which is
Mhm.
mind blowing, right? Which is
Yeah.
mind blowing. You can say build a presentation, and then you to build a pitch, sales pitch, and then you have a presentation. This is mind blowing. I think many good things are going to come in the near future with this kind of tools. And yeah, you were right. I'm more on the side of, yeah, if I have this problem, how I gonna resolve that, right? So, or
Mhm.
how can we resolve the problem using people analytics if we have
Yep.
data? Because every organization has data, right?
Yeah.
A very different thing is that they have the data organized and they can take advantage of it, but everybody has data, right? So
I
the
got a
the thing
question
here
for you,
is,
Francisco, just
yeah,
because I'm curious, and I know we've chatted before, is
yeah.
how does the behavioral approach that Kodo people takes relate to things like people analytics and adding value using data and analysis of an organization's people?
Yeah, that is a great question, and we are rooted in the assessment space because we are a behavioral assessment, a very different one, but we are a behavioral assessment. But rapidly getting into people analytics first, and
Yeah.
secondly in talent and talent selection, we could say, or recruiting, we could say. So, the thing here is that over the years we gather information, valuable information about what kind of behaviors can predict performance, engagement, productivity, different KPIs. And we put that knowledge into a platform called the people in this case, because we know, for instance, long run orientation is a great indicator of group performance. So if you are looking for increase your group performance, you should track long-term vision, long-run
Mhm.
orientation. You should hire patient people. And it makes sense. And people can say, no, that makes sense because you are hiring patient people. Yeah, but you need the confirmation, you need the data, you need to do the research. But on the other hand, if you are working remotely or in a distributed workforce, you need patient people to be able to communicate, to be able to not overthink those kind of things, align
Yeah.
with the vision. And on the other hand, once you are able to track this humanistic thing, no, this humanistic side, like behaviors, inside of soft skills, I would say, you are building strategically your future workforce.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you are missing a very important part of the movie because you are not tracking it. So Kodo People is here to shed light on that, and trying to add value to our clients. A mix between people analytics and behavioral assessment, and that kind of thing, right? Yeah, I think we are. we help HR and talent pros to be data driven. Also, I have a question related to this with for you, because
Sure.
last I would say 5 conversations that I had with HR people, they told me that data is not in their skill set. So if you talk to them about data driven people analytics, they are gonna be scared. They are gonna there is gonna be a resistance because traditionally they are not skilled. So how are you perceiving this resistance? Maybe we should focus on early adopters, or open-minded
Mhm.
professionals, or what is the key here? I'm just so curious for your experience.
Well, first of all, I wanted to compliment you on your excellent explanation. I should be worried about my job as a communicator. You're doing an excellent job, Francisco. So well
Thank
done.
you, thank you. You're
But in
gonna make me
terms
blush.
of HR business partners and the value and of the currency of having data as a skill set, or just understanding data or how to make data driven decisions, this has been a generational problem for HR. And it
Yeah,
actually, strangely enough, it gets a little bit better every year. And so if you just look at a snapshot of a particular day, it looks, somewhat of a burdensome problem. But if you look at
disheartening.
yeah, if you look at over a 5 to 10 year period, HR has made many, many strides in this space. But I would say for the folks that haven't come around yet, I have this philosophy again. That's kind of another one that I haven't heard other people say, which is choose your own boss. And what I mean by that is, if you're a leader of people analytics in an organization, you know that the people who are the early adopters, they're going to be the ones that are more successful in supporting the business than the folks who aren't using data. And I will say this, like a traditional HR business partner, what they do have in their toolkit is just talking to people. And talking to people is a good tool. But what it does lack from a statistical background is it lacks sample size. And so you have a tendency to overreact to one or two data points rather than the whole series of data about a particular department or business unit. And so for the
Yeah,
folks that understand that qualitative information is good and healthy data, I find that those are more likely to be early adopters. And so if you can find individuals who are going to be open to your work and realize that data driven decision making is going to make a difference, I partner with those individuals, help them succeed, and help them become my boss someday, i.e., the next chief people officer, right? And so in that
yeah.
way, you found a new leader who is data driven in the way that they think about things, and they're more likely to change the course and the vision of the HR department altogether because they see that data leads to success.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Honestly, I think we should be in the positive side, right? Trying
Mhm.
the optimistic side. Yeah, you're right. The profession is evolving. I think you can find some folks, uh, curious about it, being more data driven. With this clubhouse fever that we were living in the past, there were a lot of sessions, people taking, we should be more data driven, we should be more people first. Yeah. So different topics were hot topics at that time. Um, and yeah, I think we have an important job to do, which is trying to show the world that using objective and unbiased data is way
Yeah.
better than overjudging based on my vision or subjective vision, because I'm human, right? My culture, my country, my experiences. So I need to lean on in an objective tone. So why not to do it if you have this accessible? So I'm adamantly agree with you, uh, and hopefully we are going to see this change uh, quickly in the future. As many organizations were embracing the remote world and hybrid, and Paul, precisely talking about hybrid and remote, you were saying, individual performance didn't suffer. Actually, individuals were more productive, way more productive. That is
Mhm.
not an excuse anymore, right? If you want to work remote, you're going to be more productive. So for organizations saying, yeah, you should back to the office, take care, because that is not related. That is not a productivity issue.
Yep.
It could be a very different thing, but not about productivity. We found, because we did a research with ProScore, which is a platform that track online productivity and bank events,
Mm-hmm.
and we found very surprising things. So short term and long term, we're predicting performance online productivity
Uh-huh.
if individuals were working remotely. Long term was having a strong weight, predicting productivity if you are working remotely, but also envy was a predictor. And
Really?
that's super curious, super surprising. Yes, because meaning by that if you have an organization with different work modalities, you are working hybrid. Some people working hybrid, some people working remote, fully remote,
Mm-hmm.
or some people working on site because your business is has these particularities. Those who change remote for hybrid and were envious because they are, you know, their productivity suffered at that time, decreased at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And when they switched again to back to remote, they increased their productivity
Yeah.
because they were envious of the better of other people working remotely or
Yeah.
whatever the situation, right? How to do that. And also cooperative people, uh, cooperativeness wasn't a predictor of online productivity
Yeah.
um, on site. On site,
Yeah.
this is the differential because you are helping out others, and you can't be sending emails or Google chatting or whatever because you are helping others, right? Because you are
Yeah.
super covered. So I wanted to point it out because it was super interesting.
Yeah, I have
It
two
was
thoughts
so
about this.
interesting.
I hadn't heard that about envy before, but it makes a lot of sense because what I had heard and frankly experienced myself was this concept of FOMO, the fear of missing out,
Yeah,
right?
format. Yeah,
And so if you see that the crowd is doing something else, you feel a sense of FOMO, or in this case, envy, and that leads to an effect on productivity, which leads to my second point, which is human cognitions and emotions and well-being, they play an outsized influence on the individual level, but also in the aggregate level for an
yeah,
organization being effective. And that's actually one of the reasons why Orgnostic, what we have is we have a people analytics platform that's giving you all that objective data that you were talking about earlier. But we also combine that with an employee listing platform that's getting into that subjective well-being space of how are people doing? How are they feeling? And then how do those two things interrelate? And how do we create a
yeah.
system of how we think about employees and people analytics rather than just like one piece of data or one department or one focal variable? How do all the variables interrelate amongst one another?
Yeah, I love that perspective. Actually, I think it is ingrained, strongly ingrained in our mission, right? Because at the end of the day, we are people first advocates. We are humanistic. We are on the side of people always, and then performance reviews, for instance, no, which is a great data to track, for instance, the quality of hire. No, you're gonna make sure the quality of hire, tracking performance and retention, right? It could be a
Sure.
manner to measure that, but performance review itself, for me, are not valid. It's not valid because you need more. You need the other side. What is
Mm-hmm.
behind performance? The
Yep.
human part that you are not considering. You are only taking the number and saying, "Oh, this person is selling, for instance, 1 million,
Mm-hmm.
500,000." Yeah, you need to consider the person, but you consider the person not only through your subjective lens, which is great because we have developed this heuristic, the system one
Mm-hmm.
of thinking by Kahneman, the Daniel Kahneman system one,
Yeah.
is automatic, is the instinct, the heuristic of decision making, which is fascinating and works
Yeah.
really well. but we need to lean on, again, in data. We need to lean on in numbers. Um, I think,
Perhaps systems two
you know,
thinking.
yeah, 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 yeah. You're right. You're right. So, touching, because we lately we were talking in this couple of people talks about talent.
Mhm.
And without doubt, you're a super talented professional. So happy to have you here today. Um, Where's the difference, Paul? If is there any difference between people analytics and talent analytics? What do you think about this?
Um, I find these things to just be semantic differences for the most part. The one thing I'll say is sometimes talent analytics is solely focused on recruiting, whereas people
Yeah,
analytics is focused on more of the employee lifecycle. But there are talent analytics teams out there that are focused on the entire employee lifecycle as well. So again, I find that to be a semantic difference. I do want to come back though to quality of hire for a second because I know you brought that up
yeah,
earlier. That's something, a passion for which both you and I share. I think one of the things that's interesting about this conversation, Francisco, and I think this goes to your point as well about it being difficult to assess performance in an objective way, is
yeah,
quality of hire is both from a statistical standpoint, both an independent and a dependent variable. And you are probably
yeah,
focused on it as being an outcome measure of what Kodo people's assessments are trying to drive. And so quality of hire tackles the criterion problem of trying to get an objective performance by, instead of saying performance is just one variable, we're going to combine 5, 10, even 15 variables into one and say the amalgam of all of those is really the quality of that hire. But on my
yeah,
side of the table is I love to see quality of hire as a predictor for future things like engagement, like performance, like whether or not someone turns over, like whether or not they get promoted in a certain period of time, whether or not they have the appropriate employee lifetime value, which might be my favorite HR metric that exists. And so these are the ways that I think quality of hire is such an underutilized resource, but it's also a tool in our tool chest that both you and I value.
yeah. I agree. I agree with that. And that is precisely why we are trying to do, right? Because for us, quality of heart is not only about performance. It's not only about retention. It's about more things. I think it's a multifactorial thing. So I love to think of the future. How are you trying to build strategically, based on data, your future
Mm-hmm.
workforce? Because uh, the environment is changing in a high pace, and then we have to learn new things. Today, for instance, I'm going to give you a dime example. um, for instance, you need a Python developer, full stack developer, Python full stack developer. Maybe it's another language to programming. So um, we frozen. You frozen a little bit. Um, Probably in five
I can.
years we are going to find different languages. So you have to learn. You have to learn again how to program that. So, but soft skills are going to be here forever, forever. So if you are building blindly your workplace for the future and you want to succeed, you are missing something important, because maybe you are promoting a toxic leader or a crappy manager.
Mhm.
Maybe you are hiring impatient people, and then they are not being aligned, going to be aligned with your mission. Many different things. Or maybe today, for instance, uncertainty. This is our daily
Yeah.
thing, right? It's the routine. If you don't have people who are able to manage uncertainty well, what are you gonna do, right? If they are loss averse, they are not gonna take any risk, and you need to take risk. You need to take the lead. You need to, in your case, guys, you in Arch Agnostics, you are the trailblazers, right? You are trying to do new things. You are
Mhm.
bringing to the table value in a very different manner. So you are taking risks. So you
Yeah.
need people willing to take risks and to make good decisions. So for me, quality of hire obviously is about retention, is about lifetime value.
Hmm.
Um, It's about it's about performance, of course, but it's about how you, or better said, it's about the value as an employee that you can bring to your company,
Yeah.
during that period. So that's my view.
Well, I think that's an excellent view. And one of the things that I really appreciated that you've brought up multiple times during this conversation is, and it cuts through multiple different traits and skills that you said, is kind of the balancing between a short-term perspective and a long-term perspective. Is
Yeah.
I find that leaders who are able to do that are always very quite successful, because they can say, this is the mission, the vision, the change, the growth that I need to make in the long term. But also, here's the tactical ways we need to execute to be successful today. And just to kind of leave it on a light note, loss aversion is not is not something that is a word or a phrase in my vocabulary. So absolutely, we're out here to build the future, and I know you guys are doing the same thing. And so, Francisco, thank you so much for having me on today.
The pleasure is mine. I'm having a lot of fun with this conversation. We can talk for hours. Let's go into the final section, which is pretty related with behaviors, the thing that we do in Kodo People. Cole, what is the behavior that you love the most when it comes to talk about the workplace, or
Yeah.
employees, or something that can resonate with
Well,
you?
for me, if I'm really just reflecting on myself, not just for an organization, I will say humor.
Ah,
I love humor, comedy, being able to take a tense situation and bring some levity to it. That's something that I put a premium on personally, because life is too short not to have a little bit of fun, and we can have fun at work while also doing great things. And I think humor enables us to be able to do that.
yeah, that's great. I think we shouldn't take things too seriously, right? Because
Mhm.
life is tough, and then this is just a journey, right? This is just a job. This is just a company, and we should enjoy the journey. Cole, again, thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate that. I had a lot of fun. Maybe we can have some private talks about this in the
Sure.
future, because I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it. And people, thank you for being there on the other side. Thank you for your support. We are going to be back with some more episodes and with excellent people. Stay tuned. Bye.
Thanks, Francisco.